It's a Friday night. I'm stuck in a hotel in Arkansas. The Nuggets got the absolute stuffing kicked out of them by the Kings on a second night of a back-to-back. Still 29 games to go. We'll talk about it on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us on a Friday night. A little bit of different stuff going on. I got some housekeeping stuff to get to, and then we'll talk about the loss to the Kings and what it does and doesn't mean. We'll get to all that on today's show. I want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. The easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports is PrizePicks. Just go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. Some housekeeping. We recorded a show on Wednesday morning for World's Finest. Adam had that ready to go in our podcast app, and for some reason it just ate it and didn't post it. So there was a YouTube show of it, but not the podcast one. I was going to record on Thursday night before I had to go on a trip, which is why I'm in where I am. And then my internet died, so that was not possible. Cam reacted to the Lakers win on Friday morning, and then we had another podcast issue, and so that podcast episode did not go up until tonight. And then I'm going to post this podcast episode. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you're listening to this on Saturday morning, but you have two episodes to kind of catch up on. So yes, the answer is that yes, we did cover the Lakers win because it was a huge win and Cam did a great job, and you should go listen to that episode because it's a lot more pleasant. It also means that I don't get to react to it because I was not here. And the reason I was not is because of the same reason that I'm in a hotel room in Little Rock, Arkansas. This week, my dad had a heart issue come up. And so I was forced to take an emergency trip on the day of the trade deadline. I was at the airport. I literally got on a plane at 3:00 Eastern, hoping that Jimmy Butler would not get traded somewhere, or that LeBron doesn't get traded to somewhere. So dealt with all that, but I'm here. Was around for the Lakers win last night, but I was too wiped out to do a show. Anyway, so here's what is going to happen. If you want to catch Wednesday's show, just go catch the YouTube show. The Friday morning show with Cam will be in your podcast feed. So you can go listen to that. If you're listening to this one, go listen to that first. And then we'll talk about the Kings one today. I think that's all catches up. For those of you in the chat on youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets, my dad's okay. Everything's looking good. Everything is great. So good news there. And I'm going to drive him back from Little Rock to his home and then watch a certain game on Sunday with him because he's the one that made me that way. So, hopefully it'll be a good weekend, Hurricane. On today's show, we will talk about the loss of the Kings, about the back-to-back schedule. This show, I think, look, we're all going to, in any sort of media market covering a team, you're all going to talk about some of the same touchstones. And so I think a good thing to do is to listen to the show and then go catch Ryan Blackburn on Pick Action Roll with Swipa on the weekend on the Saturday show. Because it'll be kind of a tandem with those two things because Ryan and I are in kind of the same place. We just feel differently about it. And so that'll kind of provide it. Okay. Let's talk about the Kings loss. So Nuggets lose to the Kings. And I don't know if you know this, but it was not close. 135-106. Let's just go over some plus minuses, shall we? Aaron Gordon's a minus 28. Jamal Murray's a minus 21. Christian Brown's a minus 13. Justin Holiday a minus 15. Nikola Jokic gets by with just a minus 7. Julian Strother minus 18. DeAndre Jordan minus 10. Zeke Nnaji minus 11. And on it goes. Not a single Nugget finished in a plus minus. Not a single one. So the Nuggets are actually 6-4 this season when they're on the second night of a back-to-back, which is a testament to their resiliency and their decision to actually play in these games. I thought Adam made a really good point on the DMVR show, which you can check out. about, and Brendan Vogt talked about this as well, about not leaving your other teammates out to dry. That, yeah, like Jokic could have sat out, but then it's just like Aaron Gordon getting his tail kicked in for 4 quarters. And so Jokic goes out there and it's like, well, we're going to lose, and I'm going to lose with them. And I do think there's something honorable about that. What I would say, and I don't think Jokic played necessarily bad in this one. It wasn't his night. I don't think you can say it was his night with 23 points, 8 boards, 7 assists. Like, if this is 2017, I'm like, oh my God, can you believe it? Jokic at 23, 8, and 7. It's not, right? So it wasn't his night, and that's fine. He got a bad whistle. We'll talk about that in the second segment, as I love to talk about the officiating with you all. I do, genuinely. I think it's a fascinating conversation. But I do think it's important to kind of note, just within the context of this, I was glad that Malone didn't, like, he gave up the ghost when it hit 20. He was like, all right, it's not happening. Like, took Jokic out at his normal time in the rotation in the quarter, and that was it. And it was lead balloon, didn't have to make the decision. If the bench had made a run and cut to 15, does Malone go back to him? Probably, because if he could steal that win, it's just like, oh, wow, look at what we stole. I do think that they need to start. I've said this kind of consistently, and I'll say it again. I do think they need to start approaching these games with a little bit more caution regarding Nikola Jokic. And the only reason I say that is more from an emotional burnout standpoint, because he went through this last season, and then he got some rest in March, and then you get 2 weeks before the playoffs, essentially, because you can rest that last week, and you get all, like, the Nuggets will be off from Sunday through the following Saturday or Sunday. So they'll have at least 5 days off in April. And that'll be really good, because anytime that you will notice this, after the guys come back from All-Star break, they're going to look amazing. Nuggets are going to look awesome when they come back from All-Star break. They might lose the first game, but the next game they'll win if they lose the first one. Like, that's what happens. And it happens across the league. Like, everyone looks better, because if you give these guys, these athletes, these amazing, incredible athletes, just 4 days off, they look amazing. And it's incredible to me how you can look so bad on a back-to-back, and with just 4 days rest, you can look absolutely peak again. But that's how it goes. So they'll look better after the All-Star break, and then they'll be rested for the playoffs. But I do think that there's a kind of a cumulative effect. And, like, tonight was just one where you could tell the Joker was annoyed all night. He was tired, he was exhausted, and he was getting the crap beat out of him with a series of no calls. That's not fun. That's just like a bad night at the office. And, like, everyone has them, right? Everyone has bad days at work. I do think that there needs to be probably some recognition that Jokic doesn't need, that it's probably better to get Jokic the emotional and mental night off. And then, like, if the other starters need it, get them off too. No need. Like, it is okay to do what the other teams in this league do sometimes. I appreciate that the Nuggets have a stronger culture than that. I do. Like, I appreciate that they do that. I'm not saying they should do it as much as some teams do. I think there's a balance to be struck between going into Sacramento in a letdown spot after a big emotional win over the Lakers on a back-to-back and just getting wrung out for 48 minutes and, like, just punting every time that there's any sort of difficulty. There needs to be a balance between the two. And I think that there's something to be said for trying to find that balance a little bit more, regardless of the context. Now, look, MPJ, no KCP. There was nothing bad about this loss. There's nothing bad about this loss. The Nuggets played badly. There are some like short-term micro things that we'll talk about in the next segment with their defense and the officiating and some other stuff. But, like, there's no, like, this is a worrying sign. Like, I posted a stat about how they're 8-8 versus the Western Conference playoff teams. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't. The Nuggets still have the most championship equity. And that's frustrating when you're trying to get through a season because you want them to win every game. But it's something to keep in mind. This is one that you can definitely dump. But there are some micro things that I think are interesting to talk about. We'll talk about the officiating. I want to talk about Christian Brown. We'll talk about Peyton Watson and inbound passes. We'll talk about the pick and roll defense as well. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. Today's show is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capability to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. It features class-exclusive Google built-in, and as always, your updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is a perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. By the way, I have a Rogue. Love it. It's my favorite car I've ever owned. I am planning on getting a 2020. I was literally looking at 2024 Rogues before tonight. Like, I'm not kidding. That is not a I seriously was. That's how great of cars they are. Want to let you know about the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. It's got room up to 8 with an expensive cargo capacity and an advanced available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. It's great for all of you Coloradans that love to adventure all over the great state. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and bringing it up and being with us on a Friday night. I appreciate you sickos being with us after that game. There's so many folks that hanging out with us in the chat, like Grace and Hurricane, and Sean's hanging out with us, and all sorts of folks. Big Honey hanging out with us as well. Appreciate you guys being here. Let's talk about some of the micro things that have been kind of going on with the Nuggets. And like this is not a troublesome thing because they just beat the Lakers in LA and they outclassed them. Like, I just want to be very clear on that. Like, they outclassed the Los Angeles Lakers. I take a lot of grief for how often I bring up Anthony Davis's plus minus when they're like, he played great, man. You're just stupid. Plus minus is useless, blah, blah, blah. My problem is I'm just like, Anthony Davis can do can have all these numbers and have all these dunks and pick and roll and put up all these stats. And then his team loses his minutes. And that means something to me. Now, that said, if you noticed last night, without KCP, with Justin Holiday, there were a number of breakdowns on the interior, and they led to a lot of those Anthony Davis dunks, as well as Christian Wood dunks, as well as Jackson Hayes dunks. And you saw that same problem tonight. The Kings were able to slice and dice inside way too easily. There are breakdowns happening in the pick and roll coverage. Some of it's Justin Holiday, because some of it is Justin Holiday is not as prime because he's out of practice, because he hasn't played in 2 months. And he doesn't have that same chemistry, rhythm, and continuity or communication with the other starters. But some of it's just like the Nuggets execution. Their execution in pick and roll is not good right now. That doesn't mean that they won't be good in the playoffs. It doesn't mean that it's a weakness. And it doesn't mean that you can just hashtag pickle roll Nikola Jokic to death like some people pretend you can. It's not really about Joker. It's more about the timing and the sequences that they're finding themselves in part because they're trying to get to the All-Star break, and you will notice in the last 2 games they've played a lot of drop coverage, and Joker's never good in drop. Never has been, never will be. They played a lot of it the last couple of games. Why? Because they're trying to get to the All-Star break, because everybody's tired. When you're tired, it's way easier to play drop. One of the reasons that Rudy Gobert is able to play as many games as he does each and every season is not that he doesn't play hard, because Rudy does. Rudy plays exceptionally hard, but it's a lot easier to play back than it is to play up. When they do play up, the Nuggets are still having massive breakdowns, but the breakdowns that they're having are most concerningly on the interior. If you're going to get beat, if you're going to play at the level, you can't get beat inside. Like, that's the sequence. You've got to help down on the X. Like, that's what you got to do, right? That baseline help has to be there. So when they have those kind of problems, it's one thing. They're just getting beat on basic drop coverage, guys just going by them and dunking. And that's stuff that they've got to get better at. And some of it's the help. Some of it's the point of attack, and some of it's Nikola. Like, it's not a it's not a pointing fingers thing. It's easy to look at and be like, well, KCP's out, so that's why it's worse. It's not that simple, because a lot of this time is like, if KCP is on the strong side of a pick and roll where the ball's coming to that side, he's not the help man, right? Like, if Justin Holiday's up there, that's not his guy, the other guy. So they got to clean that up. I do think it's a little bit of a problem. Big Honey says, oh God, are there still put Yoke in PNR narratives? Not really. I do think I do think that let me put it this way: if the Nuggets decide to play badly, then yes, you can put Jokic in the pick and roll because you can put anybody in the pick and roll if they're playing badly, right? Peyton Watson, let's talk about him. So Peyton's had a couple of not great games. The inbounds turnover, this is not the only one he's had this season. He had an inbounds turnover tonight versus the Kings, and it's not the only one that he's had. And that to me is like the bigger issue here. It's just like you can't have those. Like, you cannot turn the ball. Okay, turning the ball over for the Nuggets is not death, but it reduces their dominance. We know that. Like the stats are there on if they don't turn the ball over, they win the game. If you can contain points off turnovers, the Nuggets win the game. It's one thing to have a live ball turnover in the half court. Having a live ball turnover on the other side of the floor in the backcourt is a disaster. And like those are mistakes that just can't happen. And for whatever reason, Watson keeps having some issues with it. And so I do think that there's probably something to like maybe Peyton shouldn't throw the ball inbounds anymore. Like they're freak plays. Just not sure it needs to happen. Other than that, like I don't think he's been great. I don't think he's been terrible. Christian Braun, I thought tonight, I've been thinking a lot about CB and just from the perspective of this is one of the problems when you expect progression from young guys. It's one thing to have it as an option. It's another thing when you expect it. And the Nuggets literally expected CB to replace Bruce Brown in X, Y, and Z. And they've gotten Peyton Watson to replace Bruce Brown in, I don't know, A, B, and C, but that XYZ has not been replaced. Christian has got to develop on his own timeline. And it's clear that he can be an impact player. He's proven he can be an impact player in not only the playoffs, but the NBA finals. That's the level to which Christian Braun can operate. And not everybody in the NBA can do that. That's meaningful. But also, one of the things that the decision by the front office to set up the long-term plan entailed was the risk of what you can't control. And sometimes guys just don't develop on the timeline that you want. And this kind of gets into the trade deadline discussion that you're going to hear a lot from Ryan. And I think Ryan's got smart thoughts on it, and you should listen to Ryan and you should consider it. What I will say is that beyond, like, there's a couple things here. The Nuggets weren't going to make a big deal at the deadline because nobody wanted their stuff. Nobody wanted to do trades with them. There wasn't a trade to be made. There wasn't an asset to send. There was nothing to give, right? In the market that was already truncated and tight, which is why we didn't see any major trades. But one of the things here is that when you purposefully design a team to say, we want to be able to compete for championships over the next 10 years, that does, in some ways, open up the possibility of this year not being your year. And I'm not saying it's not, because I still believe the Nuggets have the most championship equity. But what I'm saying is you don't have the capability. You have to choose between sustainable longevity and consistent contention, or going for it every year and living on that razor wire of, if this goes badly, we're doomed. The Nuggets are not doomed because CB hasn't made a leap. Like, they're not doomed because of that. It makes it a little harder. And this is where I get to. It's just like the margins here are tighter. I still believe that Bruce Brown was more impactful than Peyton and CB combined have been. Now, numbers-wise, that doesn't bear out. But that's a basketball analysis that I hold, is that those guys' impact is not as great as what Bruce Brown is able to bring both regular season and playoffs. It does not match up. So they're missing that. They're a little worse. They're just a little worse. Reggie, Peyton, CB, little worse than last year in terms of the punch that they can throw. And that's fine because the starters are so good that margin is there. But you've seen without KCP and then tonight without MPJ. And again, this was a schedule game, whatever. I'm talking about the execution level stuff. The margin gets tighter. And the question that Blackburn will ask, which is a reasonable one, is what if they don't have the starters for the playoff, for a series, for a game? And it's a good question. And it's hard to build redundancies. This is one of the reasons why, if you look at the trade deadline, the Mavericks getting Daniel Gafford was a really big deal. Daniel Gafford had Nikola Jokic drop 42 on his head. Joel Embiid dropped 150,000 points on him in 2 games or whatever. Killed him. Gafford can't do anything with those guys. However, the most valuable thing that Gafford provides is not an addition to the Mavericks. It's not just that he completes rotations or he gives them another big, or it's another rim runner for Luka to play with when Lively's not on the court. It's that he provides redundancy for Lively. That when Derek Lively's out, Daniel Gafford can come in and do all of the stuff that Derek Lively does. All of that stuff is stuff that Daniel Gafford can do. The Nuggets do not have the same redundancy. They do not have, Reggie Jackson can be an impactful player this year and not be Jamal Murray and not be able to fill that role. Peyton Watson can be an impact defender and not be either Aaron Gordon or KCP. Christian Brown can be an impact defender and not be KCP or Aaron Gordon. They do not have a replacement for MPJ. They do not have one. And so that difference, I think, is significant when we talk about what can happen in the playoffs, not what will, because again, they have the most championship equity, but it's something to consider. Mostly my thing is I'm trying to, I do a lot of time on this show in particular, prepping the fan base, trying to set baseline expectations, right? From a more neutral perspective, maybe not neutral, but a more neutral perspective. And one of the things that I would tell you is this isn't going to be 16-4. It's going to be harder. It's just going to be tougher. And that's going to happen for a lot of reasons. And we'll talk about some of those. Plus, we'll wrap up with some comments on Zeke Nnaji and how to look at the last 29 games for the Denver Nuggets up next on Locked On Nuggets. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's demon time on PrizePicks. I love saying that. You can win now up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and Goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play at PrizePicks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks has got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. That's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. They offer weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. And they now offer Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account during the basketball season. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnba and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedonnba with promo code LOCKEDONNBA. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Final segment here on Locked On Nuggets. Again, thanks for you guys joining us after the disappointing loss to the Kings. Hurricane asked, were you saying 16-4 at the All-Star break last year? Good point. That's a fair point. I would tell you that things broke right for the Nuggets, and expecting them to break right again is tough. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they run into a bunch of injured squads that are outmatched. Entirely possible. I feel like when I look at the board, it's tougher. And some of that's just look at where they are in the standings, not from a record standpoint. Look at where they are in terms of the Nuggets are currently sitting 4th place, a half game out of first in the Western Conference. They're just a half game back. That's fine. That's no big deal. But it is they are in stiff competition to try and get there. And where they wind up in that 1 through 4 matters a lot for how easy it'll be. 2 is harder than 1. 3 is harder than 2. 4 is harder than all of them. This is just thing. Now, there are times when that's not true. There's times when you can land a 3 seed and be in the spot. You can be in the spot as a 3 seed. But overall, I think it's important to kind of see that there's a way that this is still going to be a much tougher year. Big Honey says West is better this year, but can you honestly argue the Nugs will lose to any of those teams? No. I can't argue that they will lose to any of those teams, but this is the argument that we get into is a fan will say, if I can't tell you that they will, then they'll win. And that's not how it goes. It's probability. Everything is just probability and margin. Because I've seen a lot of really good teams just lose out on the margins and then go down. The 2000 and what year was it? 16. Was it 16? No, that was the bad year. 17. It was the 2017 Rockets. That team should have whipped the Spurs. Should have whipped them. Like, it should have clacked that team. And Harden fell apart. And then Jonathan Simmons went nuts in that series. It was crazy. And Dwayne Dedman was a monster. And they won. The margin for error was not good enough for Houston that year. Rockets should have won in 2018. They should have won that. They should have won that Western Conference Series versus the Warriors. They were the better team than the KD Warriors. Chris Paul got hurt. The margin wasn't high enough. They just didn't have the margin. And this is what I'm trying to say is like they couldn't build any more margin with the assets that they had. The Nuggets didn't do anything wrong. But you should be aware things are more tenuous. Grace, who is Jonathan Simmons? Yeah. So, do you realize that the Nuggets only have 29 games left? Like 29 games. That's it. That's all they have left in the NBA season. That's crazy. It's crazy. Like you're down to that many. Which I think is indicative of how we view the season. Like All-Star is supposed to be the mid-year. Like we are well past the halfway point. I am going to be very curious to see what the Nuggets do. What I think happens is the Nuggets are going to kind of like, they'll have a big win, they'll have a big loss, they'll have a big win. Like they'll be up and down until the All-Star break. They'll come out of the All-Star break. I think they'll play great basketball for 2 weeks. I think we're going to see the same thing we kind of saw last year, except not the extreme fall off. And that will matter because like, here's like an interesting question. I don't think they will fall off as badly, like losing to the Spurs and losing to who they lose to last year, the other team. There's somebody else they lost to that was really bad. Maybe Houston. And in that March stretch. And it made it to where it was like they were probably almost definitely going to have the 1 seed, but it was still like, well, maybe. If they keep sliding, maybe the Grizzlies can catch them. I think this year it's like they won't have that big drop off, but they'll have enough of a drop off probably to not finish with the 1 seed. Like I don't expect the Nuggets to surge through March to the end, nor do I think that they should focus on that. I think that'd be a mistake, which kind of shows you tonight's game. Probably not the last time you're going to see the Nuggets look like that, which is interesting because they actually are on pace for just about as many 20-point losses as last year. I looked up, like they're just about the same ones. And that pace, I think, is going to be important for them to kind of manage and get through because of all those kind of things. Last thing I want to talk about was I saw Trey Lyles tonight, and Zeke Nnaji and Trey Lyles were matched up for a while. And Trey's a guy that came in with a lot of, like, he was a pretty valued draft pick and kind of drifted in the league. And then, like, honestly, he played pretty well with Denver for a while. And then he found Sacramento, and he, like, fit in and clicked. And now, like, Trey Lyles is a perfectly serviceable veteran rotation guy. And that might be what Zeke winds up being. Like, I saw a lot of Trey Lyles in Zeke tonight. Lyles has a little bit more shift to his game. He's got a little bit more shake. He's got a little bit more handle. But in terms of the athleticism and the size and the wing, it was really interesting to see Trey Lyles and Zeke Nnaji matched up against them, each other. Because I was just like, oh, this really is the Spider-Man meme. Like, it's Looper. And that to me is like remarkable for seeing what Zeke Nnaji is probably going to wind up being in the league. And that's like a really good player. Like Trey Lyles he's not some huge impact guy, but like Trey Lyles is a very solid rotation player who is a professional NBA guy. And that's a very good outcome for Zeke. I actually liked what I saw of Zeke tonight. He finished at the rim and he got blown by Kevin Huerter, but trying to cover a lot of ground. Nobody's in position. I think ultimately it's like Zeke's probably going to be okay long term. It's just probably not going to be with Denver. And that's pretty normal, and that's kind of how it goes. I don't know if Swipa commented on it or not, so I do want to hit real quick on the Kamagate thing. The Nuggets traded the rights to Ishmael Kamagate at the deadline. Kind of a bummer. He had so much promise in the 2022 summer league. He looked really good, and he looked like he could be like that long-term answer they've been looking for at backup center. And then, like, you talk to the Nuggets people, and they just weren't on board. Like, they were not moved by his performance in summer league, and they really weren't moved by a lot of what they saw the next year from him in EuroLeague. And so ultimately, it never really worked out. His summer league was bad, and most of the Nuggets media was kind of like, yeah, maybe this isn't going to happen. But it's a bummer just because the Nuggets continue to try and find that backup center position. And probably this year at the draft, if they can get into the draft, if there's a spot available in the draft, if they have a roster spot to make in the draft, wouldn't hurt to at least try and find that solution through the draft, to find like a guy, find the Christian Brown of centers, probably worth looking at. Grace notes that Kamagate is a third string in Europe right now. Yeah, it's not good. It has not worked out for him. All right. That's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. I appreciate you guys being with us. I also appreciate you guys' patience this week with all the timing of episodes. We had a lot of stuff happen. Tech episodes. I had a family emergency. We had a lot of stuff happen. But we should be back on normal schedule next week. I'm going to be with you solo on Sunday. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to be with you solo on Sunday night after a sporting event occurs. And we'll react to the week to come for the Nuggets. We'll talk about what's been going on, and I'll give you my perspective on the Western Conference as well, the top of that Western Conference and the tiebreaker situations. We'll start that conversation as well on Sunday. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.